October 12th, 1999. It was an historic day. Did you celebrate? No, probably no one did. It's when the world's population reached 6 billion. Now, the scary thing is that in 1988, the world's population reached 5 billion. So it took the whole of the Earth's history to get to 5 billion, and then just 12 years to get to 6. Yeah, we're going up. All of us. By 2050, the world's population is going to be 9 billion. 9 billion. I mean, is population growth ever going to end? Can we control it? Or is it just going to be a matter of too many people without enough room? Hey, people, this is not going to work. I can't breathe. In the last 100 years, we've found ways to prevent and cure diseases. We've increased food production. More and more of us are living longer and healthier lives. In the last century in the United States, the life expectancy of an average person has doubled. So the good news, fewer and fewer of us are dying. The bad news, fewer and fewer of us are dying. See, it's the same news. There are about 150 more people in the world than there were a minute ago when this show started. The world's population has doubled twice in the last 100 years. But we here in the United States hardly notice this population explosion. Is there an upper limit to the number of people that we can have in the world? And have we gone past that limit? But for us here in the developed world, does that even matter? When populations grow unimpeded, they get big fast. In mathematics, we call this an exponential curve. When it's curved just a little bit, as you move this way, it curves a little bit more. But as it gets more curved, it curves more and more in a hurry. These horns have exponential curves. Just a little sound energy at this end makes a lot of noise at that end. Exponential curves are an old idea. An old idea. An old idea! As the story goes, in ancient Persia, a courtier presented the king with an exquisite chess set. The king was very pleased. For payment, the courtier asked for nothing more than grains of rice. The king thought the courtier was very foolish to be paid in this fashion. He wanted a single grain for the first square of the chessboard, 2 grains for the second, 4 for the third, 8 for the fourth, and so on, doubling each time. At the end of the first row, the king would need 128 grains of rice. At the 12th square, the king would need more than a pound of rice. To cover the entire debt, all 64 squares, the king would need more than the entire world's production of rice. So the courtier wasn't so foolish after all. You see where this is going, doubling each time. In 1965, when I attended the World's Fair, the world's population had just reached 3 billion people. Well, it's more than doubled in my lifetime. Now, I don't know where we are on the evolutionary chessboard of life, but how many more billions do you think the Earth can take?
Did you know that in 1800, the world population was just 1 billion people? But by 1965, it could reach 3 billion.
But, Mr. Sanders, 1965 passed a long time ago.
Yes, Mr. Sanders. It's not the 1950s. It's the 21st century now, and the world population is over 6 billion.
If that is true, children, then why are we dressed like this?
Because you made us, Mr. Sanders.
My mother says it's because you're sick, Mr. Sanders.
Every day, my parents pray for more money so they can send me to a school with better teachers, Mr. Sanders.
You should get help, Mr. Sanders.
The fastest growing countries in the world are the developing nations. The population explosion is the most pronounced in Africa and Asia. In Nigeria, for example, the average number of children born per woman is 6.2. But remember, Population growth is a global issue. As a species, we all share just one planet. That's why population growth is at the top of the list of concerns at the United Nations. What did you do at the United Nations in 1994?
Well, in 1994, I was the Secretary General of the International Conference on Population and Development. We did some surveys around the world, and we found that in every region, women wanted to have fewer children than they actually had. Even in Africa, where the family size was about 8, but the desired family size was about 4. And when you ask people why then did they have the excess number, there were very interesting responses. And the first was, well, we don't make those decisions. That decision is made by the husband, by the family, or what is expected of us by the society. And so we came to the conclusion that somehow if we could empower women, give them the information, they change the social environment in which decisions of these kinds were made, then in fact the national demographic objectives and the global demographic objectives would in fact coincide with individual needs and desires. One of the common misconceptions about reproductive health programs, particularly for adolescents, is that if you provide information, young people will become sexually active. And that if you provide them access to services like, contraceptives, condoms, etc., that they will be promiscuous, which is totally the opposite of what we have found. You find that sexual activity is, in fact, starts later, that the number of abortions or pregnancies in these countries comes down very dramatically.
1994, in human history terms, isn't very long ago.
No.
This is the first time people connected population with development.
Development, yes. I started to formulate this idea that, how women's health was so connected with all the social and cultural, the taboos, the environment, the controls that were exercised on them. Think about the fact that in many Asian societies, Africa, etc., when you have 2 children, who's educated? It's a boy. And why? Because they think that the girl, her economic security will come from being married to somebody. So she goes to somebody else's house. So why should we educate her? Even in the back of their minds is why should we keep her healthy? Because, infant mortality for girls becomes higher in many countries. My objective is to improve the lives of individual women and men and their children, and particularly of women who somehow took their lives for granted. It's only when women start to realize that they can change that they start to make the change. Till they realize that in their mind, that they can actually make the change, you have to work hard to do this.